The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, when Dr. Mark opened up our email, the email bag exploded all over him, and when Mark picked himself up off the floor, he selected an email, and we will be answering listener emails. We have a question from Tabitha, who lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and Tabitha asks, I'm a 20-year veteran. Thank you for your service. Tabitha, thank you very much for your service and your sacrifice. Tabitha continues, I hear that Pete Hegseth has instructed the Pentagon to remove the number of senior generals by 20%. Why do you think this move is being made, and what might it mean for our military readiness? Excellent question, Tabitha. Mark, Scott?
You want me to start, Mark? Yeah, because I can't answer the second part of it. I can't imagine that it's good for military readiness, but I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't know for sure. Why is he doing it? I think he's playing Secretary of Defense. I think that there's this aspect to the Trump administration that's all about like costume play. And these guys and women in his administration love pretending to be something that they're really not. And one of the things that Pete Hegseth loves to pretend is that he's a war fighter. And we need more war fighters and less administrators in the military. What one has to do with another, I'm not sure. Somebody should ask him that sometime, because I don't think we get our generals from the general population. I believe our generals come up through military schools like West Point and Annapolis, and that they get educated in the ways of war and things like that. It has nothing to do with recruiting GIs or naval sailors and so on and so forth. So I'm not really sure that I see that there's a connection to this. I understand that there is a teeth to tail ratio that needs to be maintained, but I don't think that there's an overwhelming number of 4-star generals, admirals, whatever, out there that are just, hanging around doing nothing. And of course, part of this is because of what he calls woke, this idea that they have, that the military is overly concerned with making life good for the people who serve in it, including women and minorities, et cetera. So, Tabitha, thanks for the question. I hope I answered it a little. Mark, what do you think?
Well, okay, so I kind of took it from, I actually did this, I took it from a Scott Gershwer perspective. I said, money, let's talk about money. So according to a list of, and this is basically from Wikipedia, which we don't usually pay attention to, but this is fairly accurate. There's approximately 900 general flag officers in the United States military. They make on average about $220,000 a year. So if you take that 900, reduce it by 20%, you're talking about 180 people are going to go. And then you multiply that by the $200,000 that they make per year, you're talking they're going to be saving about $36 million. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of Doge and we're going to save some money, okay, why not get rid of the lesser experienced generals? And again, when he says, senior generals, we're really not sure because that's kind of vague. And I tried to look that up as well to find out what the direct wording was. And the fact is there was no real direct wording. I couldn't tell if he was saying generals as senior officers or senior generals. In other words, those people that have been in it for a long time and basically probably make more money than somebody that's just promoted to a brigadier or, a lieutenant general or whatever. So that was kind of my question onto that, and I really don't know the answer to it. I'm very, very sorry that I don't, because I would like to know what that might help with the intent of why this is being done. Like Scott, I cannot answer about military readiness. It makes sense to me that maybe this would be a problem just because But again, the military, and I have the greatest respect for the military, but the military has a tendency to spend a lot of money, and they have a lot of money. I mean, their budget is like massive. I mean, absolutely massive. My question is do we need 900 general officers? I don't know. And I would be really interested to see exactly where he's taking, where those cuts are being made, where the Pentagon believes. Maybe the Pentagon believes that they have 20% more generals than they need. I don't know. Or admirals. I don't know. So it's very difficult for anyone who's not in the loop with the Pentagon to really give an answer, an adequate answer to this. We can only really speculate. So I'm thinking I went with the Scott answer. It's money. It's economics. It's Doge. I don't know.
I guess I considered for a second maybe that this was based on money. And then I thought to myself, well, $36 million. I'm not even sure that buys you a hubcap on an F-35 if they have hubcaps. And so I kind of rejected that because they're not usually fiscally responsible enough.
No, they're not good at that.
Yeah, that's not their thing, And we grew up, Tabitha, at a time when we all discovered to our shock that a coffee pot cost $400 and a toilet seat cost $800 and that kind of thing. The contractors take their cut. So let's again think about this from the standpoint of who's doing it rather than what's being done. And in I think it was 2023 when he was auditioning probably for this role, Pete Hegseth went on the radio and told Hugh Hewitt that he thought about a third of the military's most senior officers are actively complicit in the politicization of the U.S. military. And he says, of course, you got to fire the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which at that time was Milley. And you got to fire, obviously you got to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but you got to get rid of these generals, admirals, whatever, that are involved in any of this DEI woke shit and they have to go. So again, this is first of all the obsession of Trump with the fact that the military hasn't always been on his side. Now he wants to use the military in the United States itself, which is really troubling and against posse comitatus, as we discussed before. But he wants a military that doesn't question orders and the legality of orders. And, this also comes at a time when the nominated Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, who's a guy named Anthony Tata, who I think we've discussed on this podcast before, that is now being, questioned by the U.S. Senate, right? So in his Senate hearing the other day, he walked back a lot of comments that he said were made out of character. He's basically saying that he regrets making those comments and they were not they were out of character for him. Basically denying that, for example, former President Barack Obama was a terrorist leader, that Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters are violent extremists, that CIA Director John Brennan used a coded tweet to order Trump's assassination. So a conspiracy theorist, a lunatic of the first order, and somebody who is probably going to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, who is going to be in charge of personnel decisions in the military. Personnel decisions raid, everything, childcare, medical standards, benefits, everything. And that Tata himself had said after, Trump was reelected, that every four-star general appointed by Biden needs to be dismissed automatically. And, because again, this woke thing, and that the role of the military in the United States itself has to change. So I think that this is part and parcel of that whole general hatred that the Trump administration has of anybody who might be able to withstand him or disobey his direct orders. You know, famously, Mark Esper said that Trump asked why protesters couldn't be shot by U.S. troops, and can't you just shoot them in the leg as if that would be non-fatal, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, just the usual crazy stuff that we talk about here every week. So I think Pete Hegseth playing the part that he likes to do of like he's the GI's defense secretary is trying to say that we need more troops and less generals, and that's how you become a more lethal fighting force. I don't think it's the case. I don't think one thing has to do with the other, and this is just more ridiculousness on the part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, Tabitha, in my estimation, from the military studies that I've done, which admittedly were like in 2007, so it's been a while, and I am a civilian. I recall Trump saying that he wanted generals like Hitler's generals, forgetting, of course, that Hitler's generals had tried to assassinate him, but generals who would obey immediately anything that Hitler said. And the generals who are in place now or who are being discharged, their loyalty is to the Constitution. And Trump's first order of business for anybody who is in his administration is loyalty to Trump. My feeling is that anybody who, just like with the Department of Justice, there are so few attorneys remaining because people won't stay under the conditions of loyalty to Trump first, which means, of course, violating their oath to the Constitution and their oaths as officers of the court. So to eliminate, and I thought it was 4-star generals, but I could be incorrect, to eliminate individuals who will disobey unlawful orders, whose first commitment is to the Constitution, who are unafraid of Trump and Miller and Hegseth, and who understand what the military is for. They pose a significant blockade. This is the same thing that Trump was saying. Well, he was elected to remove all the dangerous immigrants, or whatever he calls them, and now the courts are in his way. So if he wants to use the Insurrection Act or anything else that he wants to do with the military inside this country, and as Scott just said, that of course is illegal. If the generals are standing in his way, he wants to be sure that they are not standing in his way, and one way to do that is to begin to discharge them. Look for the elevation of junior officers, and wasn't it taking out of retirement someone who was unqualified to replace a discharged individual who happened to be Black? And I'm sorry, I don't remember these people's names.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So if I can, I'll backfill there. Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Right.
So it's the same thing.
They eliminated the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? They eliminated Charles Q. Brown, who was terminated within the first month of the Trump administration. They replaced him with a retired Air Force general named Dean Cain, who is not a 4-star general and therefore was not eligible to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but they made an exception for him, a compliant Senate as usual. But here's the wild thing about that, I think, was that Dan Cain is his name, said that he wasn't the guy that Trump thought he was in his hearings in front of the Senate. The reason that Trump wanted to hire him to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was because he had met him overseas and says that Cain put on a Trump hat, a Make America Great Again red hat, cap, and said, "Sir, I would die for you. I would kill for you. I would do anything for you." And that's illegal for a military leader to do. And Cain was forced at his confirmation hearing to say, no, I think Trump actually got me mixed up with somebody else because I would never do that. And so he might have been covering his bases there with the Senate and his eligibility, or he might have just been the wrong guy. It's hard to know. I don't think there is a way to know unless there were witnesses there. And, I don't think anybody's gone out there and tried to find that out. But let's get to the second part of the question, because none of us are military people. We don't have any expertise here. But we do know that we're living in a more and more dangerous world, right? And we do know that Trump has said that if he was president, became president in 2020, that Russia would have invaded Ukraine, and that the Hamas would never have invaded Israel, and that he would end both of those wars very quickly. And clearly he has not. And now we've got yet another war. We have one in Yemen, right, which is an undeclared war where we're bombing them in retaliation for them shooting. Yesterday, Trump had announced that the Houthis had basically surrendered, to which the Houthis replied, no, we didn't. And now there's fighting between Pakistan and India, which is really, really frightening. I mean, the world right now, if they're not holding their breath, it's just because we're not paying attention to it. But we should be holding our breath because these two nuclear powers have clashed before, and it's gotten real dicey before, and this might be the big one, Elizabeth. So we're in a dangerous world, and we have unprepared military and unqualified military people at the top, and that to me is a big problem. Thanks for the question, Tabitha.
All right, so the only thing I'm going to add to this is who to really pay attention to. Many of these names I'm going to give you probably won't ring a bell, but just something to keep an eye on. Of course, Brooklyn, you did mention they were talking about 4-star, and with a little bit more research, they are talking about 4-star, and there are only 38 of those. So they're talking basically about getting rid of about 7 or 8 of those 38. So keep an eye on these names: Michael Langley, Anthony Cotton, and General Randall Reed, General Xavier Brunson, General Gary M. Brito, General Ronald P. Clark. So that's 6. Keep an eye on those names. They're all black. That would be your 20%.
You may have to look for a couple of women to throw in there as well.
There are none. There are no women. There are no 4-star flag women. None whatsoever. Yeah. But those 6 are black.
Yeah.
So if you see those 6, and they're in interesting positions. And keep in mind, there's a bunch of, there's like 3 general staff officers that are not filled at this time. So they're still looking to fill those. So I just found that kind of interesting that number of minority officers is almost equal to the number of percentage that they wish to get rid in the general 4-star general rank. So I guess the argument of to save money, 6, okay, you're saving yourself, I don't know, $1.4 million. Yeah, that's a drop in the bucket. I don't know if F-16s have hubcaps either, but probably if it does, it costs more than that. So yeah, it's interesting when you start really digging into it. I'm not saying that those 6 are the ones that are going to go, but it's just interesting in an administration that hates DEI that they're looking at basically getting rid of 6 or 7, and that seems to equate to the number of minorities that are on the general staff. So hopefully we've answered that.
Well, also, I just wanted to add that no one has said anything. This is the first I've heard that 3 of those roles are already empty. So actually, then there would be a drop of 9 4-star in the because if 3 roles were already empty, then there should be 41.
Actually, it's 5 roles are empty.
5. Okay, then we're already underprepared. And I mean, we saw with it, what was Tommy Tuberville or whatever, who was holding up all the with his ridiculous antics, and criminal, actually. I mean, for us to be underprepared. I think that's at this point for me, anything, Tabitha, anything that since our conversation last week, I can call it an administration, but in my opinion, it's a regime, is not for the good of the United States and is for the good of whatever Trump wants at the time. I would say it corrodes our military readiness. I am highly skeptical of any rationale that is given. And as you say, Mark, it's very interesting that the number of minority 4-stars is approximately the same number of positions that is being under discussion. And the amount of salary saved relative to the amount of money that the war materiel, the machinery of war costs is infinitesimal. That's just nonsense. So it's not the money. They're talking about giving $1 trillion to the Pentagon. It's not the money. It's people who are going to uphold the Constitution and who will say no and who will mean it and who can credibly stand in the way of Trump's coup effectively in taking over this country. I mean, if the courts don't have the military is the military, and they are required not to follow illegal orders. So you remove all as many people as you can and install other people who will not say no over time. So I see this pattern. I really don't like what I see.
And to be honest with you, Brooke, you can also see a pattern on those 5 vacancies. Number 1 is the Assistant Secretary for Health, who is a General Staff Officer. That's one of the vacancies. The Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Now that, okay. Maybe not that critical because there is a Chief of Staff. The Commanding General, U.S. Army Materiel Command is vacant at this time. The Vice Chief of the National Guard Bureau. Again, Vice Chief, maybe not as quite as important. The Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, Director of National Security Agency, and the Chief Central Security Services. That is one position that is also vacant. So it's interesting to see the positions that are vacant now, doing the math. Again, not saying that that's what the intent is, but hey, we'll see.
We'll see. Really, there's going to be a lot of discussion about those empty positions or what they do, what the roles, the scopes of those roles either. So Tabitha, I really hope we answered your question. It's an excellent question, and I really appreciate your asking. Thank you again for your service and your sacrifice for our nation. Thank you for spending time with us on the Nova Society. Stay safe. See you again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert, cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com.